Hi there, I'm Stevie, I'm the head chef at Restaurant Andrew Fairley. We're inside the Gleneagles Hotel, which is in Perthshire in Auchterarder. Today we're going to look at this beautiful turbot we have in front of us. We're going to talk about its sourcing, its sustainability, and we're going to look at the quality points, what we're looking for a fish that is in great nick. From there we're going to prepare it two different ways. We're going to show one side, the thinner fillets, as skin off fillets, ready for pan frying. So the turbot itself, I mean obviously the turbot lives in the sea. Turbot will be either deep water or shallow water. This turbot here is a bycatch from langoustine fishing. So the fishing method they use for the turbot and the langoustine is it's a very, very light net that they use, which is gently draped over a drifting boat. There are no weights on the net. There's a couple of little wheels which help the net trundle over the seabed. And what that does, that very carefully lifts up only the good things that you want to take from the seabed. It doesn't damage the seabed at all, this method of fishing. Also, the holes in the net are of a size that any young stock won't get caught, so those young stock have a chance to live their life and become one of these guys here. So this fish was landed in Scrabster. Scrabster's in the very north central Scotland. Quality points we're looking for on this fish and any fish is, first and foremost for me, take a step back, have a look at it. Is there anything that's bumped or bruised or anything that doesn't look natural? First and foremost for me, it's a beautiful, natural, classic turbot, kind of oblong shape. The turbot itself has a really nice, natural sea slime on it, which is a great thing. It's a great show of freshness. Any turbot that's become a day older than it should be would start to dry out and you would lose the sea slime. The sea slime itself is not edible, but it is a very, very good thing to have as an example of freshness. Also, the firmness of the flesh. If you take your finger and you just gently feel the thickest part of it, you can see the flesh springing back on you. It's not sinking in. That shows a real firmness. Any fish that was a day older than it should be again would sag when you did that, and it would leave a fingerprint in there as well. Also, the eyes is a good one as well. We talk about the eyes being sunken, not to accept a fish that's got sunken eyes. The turbot here, you just gently touch the eyes, you can see them popping back as well. So inside here we've got the breathing apparatus of the fish. It's the gills. Another great way of testing for freshness is these should be really nice and pink, as you can see, and they've got a lovely sea slime on there as well. That one there is probably that, and the eyes are probably the two best ways of telling you exactly how fresh this fish is. So sous vide cookery does play its part in our restaurant in Gleneagles, but for fish we do not sous vide cook any fish. Turbot is one of those fishes whereby it really benefits from a couple of different methods of cookery. Pan frying a piece of turbot and serving it with a golden brown, crispy, crunchy exterior and a soft, moist interior is one way of enjoying turbot at its best, and you just don't get that by cooking sous vide. Another way of enjoying turbot is by roasting a larger section of the fish on the bone. You can roast it or you can butter braise it and then resting it in its own juices. If we sous vide cookery fish, turbot, sometimes it can be very, very soft and it can change the texture of the fish, and the last thing we want to do is create something that is unnatural. Freezing fish is actually a very good technique to be used as long as you understand and you work it properly. So the freezing of fish is not a problem, but it's the thawing process that can create problems. We do freeze whole fillets of fish in the restaurant. Turbot freezes particularly well and it thaws particularly well as well. So when we remove our turbot from the freezer, we will thaw that naturally overnight in the fridge, and then the next day we'll cut our portions from there. What that does is, turbot itself is a really, really meaty fish. It's very, very firm fleshed. What this freezing process or the thawing process does is actually helps to break it down, and it makes it a much more enjoyable texture to eat and far more easier to digest as well. But be careful if you freeze fish that you don't thaw it too quickly. If you thaw fish too quickly, then all the juice is going to piddle out it and you're going to lose any integrity that the fish ever had. Is turbot the king of fish? Yes, in my opinion, turbot is the king of fish. It's a grand thing to look at, it's a great thing to work with. The firm texture, the meaty flesh is very, very rich. When you eat it, you do feel as if you're eating something special. When you're cooking it, you do feel as if you're cooking something special. And as a choice of fish to give to somebody, it's one of the first choices of fish that I would give to somebody who is trying fish for the first time or somebody who is a fish lover. Turbot will always feature on our menu at Restaurant Andrew Fairley. Making a fish dish and making a fish sauce, you can serve, for example, a champagne sauce with roasted turbot is the perfect harmony, and there is no grander drink to accompany the grand fish that is a turbot. Okay, so the turbot itself it's a big stocky fish. It has got thick skin, it's got deep flesh, and it's got very strong bones. So in order to prepare the fish properly, give the fish the respect that it's due, we need to select our tools properly and use the right tools for the job. But also what's important as well is that we use the tools that we're comfortable with. So if you've got large hands, use a large knife. If you've got small hands, use a small knife, would be my advice. But it's really, really important that all the tools you use are razor sharp, making clean incisions in your turbot to do the fish justice. So there's a natural line that comes here, which helps us to see where the head is, and we can take first thing we're going to do is take the head off, round to where the gills are, and then if you see at the edge, there's fins that are here, fins on both sides, and there's a natural seam that appears when you lift the tail, and we're going to use our equipment to come round there. The tail we're going to trim off. We're going to take the sections of fish off and show you a couple of preparations of each section of fish. But then we're going to talk a little bit about the bone and the bone structure and what's within the bones as well, and the best way to draw what's in the bones to get yourself a fish stock. The equipment we're going to use for this today, I've got two sets of scissors. I've got some very sharp thick scissors to help us get through the thicker bones, and some small snipping scissors which are very sharp to get through some of the smaller bones. I've got my old friend fillet knife, which I've filleted many, many fish with over the year. A really good clean diamond steel. And then we've got a nice razor sharp Japanese style knife that's got a very, very thin blade, which is going to help us cut accurately our portions. Okay, so we're going to now prepare the fish. First thing we're going to do is remove the sea slime. And then from there we're going to trim the fins. We're going to remove the head, we're going to remove the tail, which gives us a much more manageable piece of turbot to then trim to look to get ourselves portions that are fit for the restaurant plate. Okay, so kitchen cloth, very clean, is the safest way to remove the sea slime. And again, just little gentle washing motions to get the sea slime off. The reason we take the sea slime off is because we're going to be cutting quite deep with very sharp knives. If the sea slime is on there, then your knife might slip and the turbot might slip. So curiously enough, if you look at the top side of the turbot, the colouring of it, the texture of it, is completely different from what's on the other side of the fish. So another side of the fish is white, and the top fish side is that darker mottled colour with texture. This is smooth on the underside. The reason for that is because of the habitat where the fish lives. So obviously fish is food, but it's not just food for restaurant customers, but it's food for other bigger fish. So the turbot itself is going to lie in the shale, the bottom of the seabed, and it can bury itself in, so a predator won't see it. It can hide within its own environment. Hence the reason why nature has adapted its top side to look like this, and its bottom side it doesn't need to be any other colour because it's lying belly down. What does a turbot eat? A turbot eats small prawns, and the way turbots don't have massive teeth, but what they do have is a massive mouth. So a turbot will feed like this. It will glide along the bottom of the seabed once it sees its dinner, and it will draw water and it will draw prawnage inside its mouth, and then it will feed from there. You see, you need to be careful because the turbot has got tiny little rows of very, very sharp teeth. So when you're preparing the fish, that's another thing you'll need to be careful of, is the sharp teeth in there. But an idea of just how a turbot eats and where a turbot lives. So a turbot is food for you and I, but it also needs to eat itself. So there's the fins here. With my scissors, I'm going to snip off. Take your turbot to the other side, and here's another fin here that we're going to take off. Pop that there. Moving the turbot back over, and again that technique we had before, so using the weight of the tail, the back of the fish, and just pulling the head to its maximum length, not stretching it too hard, and it's just sitting nice and tight, nice and taut, so that when it comes to cutting the fish, everything is as clean and as straight a cut as it can be. So I'm making one single cut into what would be the top of the spine, where the neck is, where the head joins. And I'm going to turn that over there. And if you feel for the anatomy of the fish, there's a large cavity here. And then round here, the actual top of the turbot flesh comes here, just at the base of the head. So if you can feel it's hard, it guides you. Nature's brilliant, and it's giving you a guiding line to work to. There's no rush for this. You need to take your time, and you need to find your way around it properly. You come to here, and then I'm going to put my knife in just where the flesh joins the head, and again making a single cut there, and all we've done there is remove the head. Again, bringing the turbot round, and that technique we had before, just pulling it nice and taut. So you can start to see the fillets here, and you can start to see what would be the shoulder of the fish here. My next cut is going to be across the tail. This is where I'm going to take my serrated blade, and again, this hand very firmly holding the fish. My knife is very sharp, and it's my knife that's doing the work. It's actually not me that's doing the work, it's the knife that's doing the work, and a gentle sawing motion in a runner to cleanly take the tail off. So the parts that we're taking off are now going to start to form the base product for the stock that we're going to cook. So it's almost starting to look like portions of fish now. So if you look here, is the top of the spine. The little circle disc is the top of the spine, and then if you look down the turbot, there's a natural seam that comes right down the back of the spine. That is nature telling you this is the line we're going to cut on. So with a razor sharp fillet knife, you put the tip of your knife on top of this and cut down until you meet the bone. You know when you'll meet the bone because the knife won't go any further. And again, in a gentle but firm stroke, pulling down your knife on top of the turbot. Scissors now. There's little knobbly bits in the flesh that we can just snip with our scissors to release the skin, like that. And then back to our fillet knife, down to the backbone, and then it's ribs that come that way, and there's ribs that come that way, there's ribs that come that way, and there's ribs that come that way. But there's also the top here, so just with the tip of our knife we need to release the flesh here. And if I can go back to my scissors, we can start to use them. So the knife won't cut through this, and the bones of the turbot at the top are firm, and as you come further down they become smaller and finer. And it's just little, I'm only really using the top tip part of my knife. I'm not going at it in large gouges, it's just really elegant and very, very finely taking it down. You can hear it's cutting the bone, but you can also use the bone as your guide. I'm not actually cutting the flesh, it's the bone I'm cutting here. And it's short and sharp, clean, concise cuts. So then we've released the bone. Sometimes you'll find a bit of blood. I would remove that from the board, because all that's going to do is just taint and colour your flesh. I'm just now taking my knife down the arch of the turbot. So you can see where the backbone is, and you can see where the rib bones are coming out. And again, you've got a flexible blade, which is allowing me to tuck onto the bones and release the flesh. Again, using a really sharp knife that's flexible allows you to let the knife do the work. Once we get to the end here, back to the scissors, and then just snip round. So that's parts we're not going to use. First fillet off, and you can see the meat is here and the meat's not here, so what we've got is the bones that we can then chop to make a stock. Turning the fish over, again finding the top of the spine where the head was joined, the neck position, and you can see the line that nature's given us there. Put my knife in, and then just drawing gently but firmly down the line, and the tip of the knife just to come inside where the flesh is, back to the same point that we had before, pulling our scissors in, and that noise that you can hear, the crunch noise, is just the tip of the scissors taking us through the bone. And once we've released the top thicker part of the bone, we can then fingertips just tease the fish away from the bone, the tip of the knife, and allowing the knife and the fish to work together. It should never be a fight. It should always be letting the fish guide you, let the fish guide your knife where it needs to be. And if you need to stop with your knife and just snip again with your scissors, then that's the right thing to do. Okay, so there's your two fillets off the smaller side. Here, we're going to put that half there and show you the Troncon preparation next. To make the fillets, if you see, you run your finger around here, so the flesh is here, that's the piece we don't want to cut. And then run your finger to the edge where you get the frills. There's another natural seam which is very helpful for you. Take your knife and run in between the frills and the seam here. So you remove the frills, and then you can see the turbot flesh, which we're now definitely starting to recognise as our portions of fish. And it's at this stage where we're starting to trim up the portions for the plate. And for pan frying, it's really important to remove the skin. Turbot skin itself is great for stock. It has really good flavour. It's got a lot of starch, but it's not great for pan frying. So that's one portion that we need to skin. And then the next portion here, we're going to select like this. Cut it nice and clean, and then coming down the seam here, which we can see, putting the tip of the knife at the top and just following the seam. So we're not cutting the flesh, we're certainly not cutting the bone, all we're cutting is the skin in single cuts. And then removing the flesh out the fish, like that. So there's what I would say is 2 portions of turbot ready to be pan fried or grilled. To remove the skin from the fish, so this is completely boneless, and I'm putting the fish onto the board, and again using the weight of the fish to almost secure it to the board. And then right at the back of the tail, I'm cutting down until my knife touches the skin, and then just with, again, letting the knife do the work, I'm holding my finger and thumb. This is holding quite firm, this is on the board quite firm, and then just gently keeping my knife against the skin. A gentle sawing motion, cutting through the flesh but not cutting the skin, using the knife to do the work. And then I remove the skin, and then I've got the flesh, which is here. So that would be one portion that's cut from one side, and then the same process for the other fillet that sits on top. So again, if you can see, it almost just locks itself on to the board, but I'm pulling the skin tight, and again just a little nick down to the skin, and I'm only really using the first half of the knife, and just a gentle sawing motion, cutting the fish, letting the knife do the work, and then just removing that fillet so there's no meat left on the tail. And then the fillet of the turbot has just come off like that. So we've now got 2 perfect portions, skinless and boneless, that we can season with sea salt and then pan fry in butter. So moving on from the fillets, we're going to prepare the Troncon, or the cross section cut of the turbot, which comes from the thicker part of the fish. And again, you can see what we've got here is the backbone, the spine, and then we get the rib bones coming off here. So these rib bones come halfway up the fish on this side, but the rib bones come all the way up the fish on the other side. I'm going to just take a couple of strokes of my knife across here. I'm going to use my eyes and find where the spine is, and then just with the tip of my knife, just this first 3 centimetres here, I'm going to make an incision here, just to expose the spine. You can see it's a round bone that joins onto flat bones. And again, letting the bones guide me and letting the knife do the work. So the knife is sharp and the flesh of the fish is firm. So again, they work together perfectly well to achieve a beautiful cut. A little tip for you when you're working with a piece of fish as big as this and working with a sharp knife, I'm standing with my feet quite far apart, more than I would say the width of my hips. So I'm really on a solid base and I'm in control. The board's not running about, the fish isn't running about. Where I cut and how I cut, it's up to me, but I'm standing on a firm base. So if you can see, I'm running my finger up the start. You can see I've just had a little 1 centimetre cut here on this side. What we now do is turn the fish over, and we repeat the same process on this side. So we can see our rib bones are on this side now. We've got our spine here, and then again just taking the tip of our knife, the first 3 or so centimetres, and just running it down the spine. To about there, just to release the flesh and release so it's at this stage where we can take our finger and thumb, we can run up the length of the spine along the ribs, and we're starting to expose this side of the fish like that. So also, if you see on this, you can see there's a natural seam here where we want to cut with our knife. A tip for you is to the back of your knife make an imaginary line, which is a guide for you. So you can see that in front of my eyes here. We can see the perfect shape of the fish that's there with the back of my knife. So I've marked that out for me just to make sure there's no mistakes. Like that. We can turn it over, lift the tail, and that just exposes the line where the flesh meets the fins, and again we can do it with the back of our knife again. Like that. We've got an imaginary line there. So the first cut you're going to do with your knife is here, and again gently sawing through the skin, not trying to cut too deep into the flesh, and following your imaginary line up and round gives you that first cut into the side of the fish. Taking it back over, an imaginary line is still there. Same process, that first part of the knife, there's more control there than there is with the whole blade. So you don't really want to be cutting here, you want to be cutting with these first 2 centimetres here. And again, just putting it in and giving it a gentle saw through the skin, which is thick. And then just pulling your knife round again on your imaginary line, starting to expose the white flesh that's underneath, like that. Putting your fingers in there to feel through it, taking your knife down one more time, like that. Okay. So the next stage would be to select your scissors and then use your line, which are in the same place on the bottom and the same place on the top, and then just have a snip. So what we're not cutting through is flesh, we're now cutting through bone here. I'm pulling this quite tight, the same process as we would be if we were skinning the fish, and just following the line and letting the scissors do the work all the way through. Okay, so we've got the frills off, we've got the fish there. That is the frills from the filleted side, and you see that's a double, so that's the frills from the Troncon side. Now we need to remove this big guy bone here, but we've exposed it, which takes us in, so the spine's really thick, but the rib bones are really thin. So it's at this stage where we want to take our smaller snipping scissors and just come through the smaller bones. Up till we get to the bigger ones. And back onto the scissors and just snipping in the little channel that we cut when we were coming round the backbone. So there's the bone that's been removed from the Troncon side and the bone that's still there from the filleted side. And what we have got here is so 2 fillets of the turbot, which are still in the bone, but the large bone's been removed. Okay, so we've got our second half of the fish now, which is our Troncon set. It's 2 fillets, still intact with the bone. So you can see the bones here. We've removed the spine and we've still got the rib bones in. So I'm going to cut a portion. Tip for you as well, this is straight and that's curved. So when you're cutting your portion, set your knife here straight but the back of the knife come with a curve so that what you cook is even and what you serve is even as well. So there's the first portion, single portion, a Troncon of turbot. It's a cross section of the fish where you can see the top fillets and the bottom fillets, but in the middle is the bone. And then the second part we're going to cut is a nice piece of turbot, again through the bone, another portion to serve, another portion Troncon to serve in the restaurant, with the top fillet and the bottom fillet and the bone going through. But this beautiful piece here is a piece that we would braise and serve whole for 2 people. So now we've prepared the fish and we've cut our portions. We're going to select the parts of the fish that we're going to use to make a stock. We're going to talk about how we prepare the fish for the stock, and then we're going to talk about how we cook the stock and what we can do with the stock afterwards. So the bones are fabulous. The bones are full of flavour. The bones inside, the larger bones, are filled with a fish marrow, which what they do is they give a real density and a real unctuousness to our stock, and then they give a gelatinous property to our stock as well. The fins work a treat. There's skin on there, there's more bone in there as well, so that's going to be good for us. The tail's fabulous. The tail's a big muscle, and it's full of character and depth of flavour, essential. The skin works really well for making a stock. Again, it's full of flavour. So these parts here, what I would do is snip into smaller pieces. So typically, if you were to make a meat stock, make a beef stock or make a lamb stock, you would be using large bones and you would be cooking them for a long period of time to extract the flavour from them that way. With fish, it's obviously smaller bones, more delicate, and you have to cook it for less time and more gently to get the best out of it. So I'm snipping these into what I would say is bite-sized pieces. Although we're not going to eat it, it's really just for you to get a gauge on the size that we're cutting them. There we go. And again, my big serrator, just to start the cut. Back onto the scissors. Splitting in half. Advice from here would be, if there's a little bit of redness from any blood that's in the fish, then this should be into a bowl and run under a trickle of cold water for 35 minutes, 45 minutes, just to remove any blood colour or impurities and give you a really, really white, washed turbot bone and turbot skin to make your stock with. So from here, to make the stock into a suitably sized pot, I would put all my washed turbot bones and skin. On top of that, I would put cold water, just enough to cover. Don't try and make tons of stock. What you're trying to do is make a small amount of brilliant stock, something that's full flavoured, getting the best out the bones. What we're trying to do here is just gently draw the flavour and the character from the fish bones and fish skin. Very, very gently bring the stock to a simmer and then cook that for 10 minutes. Once it's cooked for 10 minutes, you're going to add a white mirepoix, but quite specific on the white mirepoix. A little bit of shaved fennel, a little bit of thinly sliced onion, and a little bit of thinly sliced celery goes into that. There's no need for garlic, and a few crushed white peppercorns. The reason we cut them nice and thin is because we want the fish bones and skin, and we want the vegetables to cook at the same time, so that once the stock's cooked, you're actually cooking the vegetables so you could take them out and eat them themselves. You want everything to be cooked perfectly. It's the optimum time and the optimum temperature for cooking everything, so that that juice that comes out is at its absolute peak. We say we're making a fish stock. What we're actually making is a turbot juice, something that's really, really intense, and it's only going to lend itself to the portions that you've cut today. We don't want to make a bucket that tastes of nothing. We want to make literally a cupful that tastes fantastic. So once we've cooked the vegetables, the whole stock cooks for 20 minutes. We then let it rest for another 20 minutes, and then once it's resting, we can then very, very carefully decant the juice, the turbot juice, through a double muslin, and what that's going to give us is a very clean, very pure, very clear turbot juice is the stage we're at now. And then from there, that can be mixed with some fresh vanilla, some double cream, some creme fraiche, some cider, you choose, and then that would create a beautiful rich cream sauce to work in perfect harmony with your braised fish or with your roasted turbot. Thank you very much for watching today. I hope you've all been enlightened, and I hope you're all going to take the little tips and the little techniques that we've shown today and take your food cookery, your food preparation onto the next level. All the best.